There's the President of the United States taking no questions after a very high-stakes speech. It was supposed to be at 11:30. It was moved up to 11:15. The president, nevertheless, showed up after 11:30. He announced a general framework. Noteworthy, a framework is not legislative text. It's not a deal. It's not something that can be voted on. You have Representative Jayapal, you have AOC, the progressive wing of the party, saying, we need to see that text. Bernie Sanders out with a statement just before the president took the stage saying it needs to be improved. Speaking of the framework, that very same framework which Kirsten Sinema described as making significant progress. So leaning more towards the moderates, away from the progressives, no deal, nothing that can be voted on today. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany. Welcome all of you. I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Compagno, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy, Fox Nation host, Tomi Lahren, and in the center virtual seat, former Senate candidate in Michigan, Iraq War veteran, and business owner, John James. Welcome, everyone. John, I want to start with you. Look, I've been in the White House as press secretary. I remember going to the chief of staff's office, Mark Meadows. I would prod him on where our party stood on any given issue, on COVID relief, how much is school funding, on the National Defense Authorization Act, where are we? I was fortunate that my boss was a creature of the Hill. He always knew where the party stood, and I could go to the podium with accurate information. I didn't, have to inflate a deal that didn't happen, but I know how high stakes those moments are. It doesn't appear that Ron Klain is serving the president well by releasing this framework, pumping us all up, only to really deliver nothing, a faux victory lap on the domestic front before he heads overseas.
Victory lap. That's exactly right, Kayleigh. And that's something that I want y'all to remember. It's about victory laps. It's about political wins. And right now we're in this rushed situation where nobody knows truly what's going on, because this party and this administration in particular governs based upon polling and panic. And right now they're showing their polling cratering, and they're panicked about what's going on in Virginia and around the nation as a result of their ineptitude. Right now, we are going down the same dark path of rushing something so important through, the same way we got into that botched pullout in Afghanistan. Joe Biden was so anxious for a victory lap on 9/11 that he was willing to sacrifice 13 service members in Kabul. And right now, we're running down a path. We're about to spend trillions of our children's dollars to satisfy campaign promises of this administration and people who are going to have to go on the campaign trail to show that Democrats can actually govern. I think that we deserve much, much better from our administration. And it's not about looking good and keeping up with the Joneses. It's about taking care of our population and our people, and not being concerned with ego-driven timelines and artificial agendas that this administration is trying to push.
Yeah, it's a fascinating comparison that you mentioned Afghanistan. He wanted that 9/11 photo op, essentially, of being out of the war, an artificial deadline, and we saw chaos, much like what we're seeing now domestically. Tomi, I want to give our viewers a little bit of a history lesson, because Joe Biden went to the Hill previously, earlier this month, and anytime a president of the United States goes to the Hill, you end up getting leaks from members, from lawmakers that he met with. Here were some of the, I should say, background comments made by some of his members for the last meeting. Here it goes. This was Politico. The fact that the president came to the Hill and whipped against his own bill is the strangest thing I have ever seen. Yeah. When the president of the United States comes, it's to close a deal, not to say hello. Massively disappointed, reported ABC. Fox News' our own Jackie Heinrich. One source describes Biden's visit as a, quote, nothing burger. The last time the president went to the Hill, Tomi, it was to presumably push for a vote on infrastructure. Instead, what he did was he linked infrastructure with this massive government takeover and essentially made Nancy Pelosi's job a lot harder, in a disaster in the making. His own members said it, though they were on background.
Well, the American people watch our president, and I think we're all thinking much the same thing. I think even Democrats are being honest with themselves. Why should we trust you? Why should we trust your administration? You've done nothing in the last almost 10 months that would give us any reassurance that you are governing effectively, that you have a plan and an agenda for this country that's going to be effective, efficient, and prosperous for the American people. We have little trust in this administration, and it takes a little more than going to the grocery store and seeing the empty shelves or hearing that this is going to be the most expensive Thanksgiving Thanksgiving in history. Things like that, things about our southern border being wide open, and our president tells us he's too busy to attend to that matter. So we hear him talking, we hear the fluff, we hear his notes about women working and climate change, but we're really left with a big nothing burger. We're left with a president who doesn't seem to have any sense of direction, and the American people are suffering as a result. Now, the only thing that we can hope is that there are some moderate Democrats out there that truly believe in the American spirit, the American dream, and do believe in some semblance of limited government. And we hope that we'll get that delivered to us. But this president clearly is in over his head, doesn't know what he's doing. Quite frankly, I don't think he has the time to govern.
Yes. One thing I know that the Democrats do believe in, the moderate Democrats, is polling, Emily, and this is unpopular in West Virginia. It's unpopular in Arizona. These, of course, are states that Manchin and Sinema hail from. Not only that, the Associated Press reporting that there's a 36% approval rating of the way Joe Biden's handling this. 36%. Part of that may be because there are mistruths into what this all costs. Can you walk us through that? They say it's $2 trillion. It's actually far more than that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that. So John James talks about political wins, but it's at the expense of the American person, the American people, and the American tax dollar. So here's an example. What these guys have packed in there, sure, okay, $2 trillion worth of programs, but it's actually $4 trillion because they include these false expiration dates that they know will either draw in new constituents or maintain those on the progressive left that are wondering if they should flee the independents whose approval ratings for the president have dropped by double digits. Things like that. And then instead they know that anyone in power will not let these programs lapse. And to give you a couple examples of what it actually affects, it includes child credits, it includes paid family leave, it includes Medicaid expansion and Obamacare subsidies. These aren't small programs. No. This will inflate the cost by double, and to the inflation that Kennedy knows much more about, it will really be more like triple the amount. And that's our dollars.
Yeah, and we have it all added up. We did it for you guys. Here is what we're spending this year. It adds up to $7.5 trillion. Kennedy, look at that. Government expansion, reconciliation, $4 trillion, $1.9 trillion in March. I mean, man, we're just made of money, it appears. And what are we spending on? My former colleague, Stephen Miller, I think said it best. Democrat priorities are mind-blowing. They're dropping paid family leave for Americans, but keeping mass amnesty for illegal aliens and uncapped foreign workers for big tech titans. So what it delivers is for illegals and billionaires. Bernie Sanders is sounding like a corporatist.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in his speech, the president was just attacking billionaires and, you know, multi-billion-dollar corporations, but they're playing by the rules that Congress set for them. You know, so you have this, these two massive behemoths, big government and big corporations working together, and that's what cronyism is, because they donate a lot of money to these campaigns to make sure that the tax laws favor them. And when President Biden says things like everyone's going to pay their fair share, he's really giving a wink because he doesn't mean it. He knows that billionaires and big corporations are going to be able to get out of the tax requirements.
Tommy, I'm on outnumbered and my IFB line just dropped. Could you latch me back in on this line?
Yes, Tommy, don't you worry about a thing. I got you, sister. But I just want to say Joe Manchin and AOC should not be part of the same party. And the president knows it. I think Tommy was absolutely right when she said the president is in over his head. He cannot walk this tightrope. I think Nancy Pelosi is actually a little bit more adept. You were pointing out earlier that she went into the Progressive Caucus today. She's going to crack skulls because she wants this deal done. I don't think the president knows how to do it.
Yeah, and there was some reporting that she wanted to vote on that infrastructure bill today, which is a really clever move on Pelosi's part. You know, Biden's in the air overseas. She demands a vote, putting a lot of pressure on those progressives, but I think they don't bend. It apparently was a very brief meeting in the Progressive Caucus there when she went. But speaking of Pelosi, can the progressives really trust her? Can any of us really trust her? John James, flashback, here's 2010.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
John James, can anyone trust Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden for that matter?
Well, you can trust Nancy Pelosi to do what's best for Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi right now cares more about retaining that gavel than she cares about her next breath. She only understands Washington. She's a creature of Washington. And right now, she only sees the ability to show the American people that she, in her demented, twisted way, can lead. She understands the deadline that she's running against is one of those artificial deadlines that's based upon Election Day and the cratering numbers for Democrats around the country. They see the writing on the wall. They recognize this is the only time they're ever going to have to push their socialist agenda through to maintain her ability to maintain power. This is not about the people. This is about her maintaining power. You can trust Nancy Pelosi to do exactly what's best for her and not the United States of America.
May I quickly just underscore what you just said, John James, by reminding everyone that the AARP came out today with a statement that said specifically, we have no idea why the Build Back Better program fails to lower prescription costs for virtually every American family. So that right there hits the nail on the head, that when push comes to shove, the American people is the very last thing that these people care about.
Oh, but don't worry, Emily, because the illegal immigrants get amnesty. So don't worry about that. The American people come last in Joe Biden's America. We know that to be true.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.